Hi everyone, welcome to CIRA's online learning modules for landlords. We're going to get started. We hope that these sessions will help you understand your AODA obligations, and we are also going to direct you to where you can learn more about what we're going to talk to you about today. This is module 3 of 4. If you haven't listened to the first two modules, they can be accessed on our website at www.equalityrights.org under Information for Landlords at any time. In addition to these modules, there is a comprehensive guide. If you would like a copy of the guide, please provide us with your email in the chat box, or please visit our website as well. Before we begin, we would like to acknowledge that these modules were made possible by funding through an Enabling Change Partnership project with the Government of Ontario, and we are very grateful for their support. My name is Alyssa Brierly, and I am the Executive Director and General Counsel here at CIRA, the Center for Equality, Rights in Accommodation. And I'm joined today by Carly Bowie.
Hi, my name is Carly Bowie. I'm a project coordinator at CIRA.
So for those of you who are not familiar with CIRA, the Center for Equality, Rights in Accommodation, we were founded in 1987 as a province-wide, not-for-profit charity dedicated to promoting human rights and ending discrimination in housing. Our public education and outreach initiatives work to intervene in cycles of discrimination that disproportionately affect low-income and marginalized individuals in the housing market. Through public education, advocacy, and occasional test case litigation, CIRA works to address barriers that prevent individuals from accessing and maintaining housing. And before we start, one quick disclaimer. This webinar and the accompanying guide are intended to provide general information about your accessibility obligations. It is not legal advice, nor is it intended to substitute for legal advice. For information or questions about your specific situation, please be sure to consult a lawyer.
Creating accessibility policies is important for housing providers to identify because it shows your businesses and organizations' commitment to reaching accessibility goals that will be known to your employees, residents, and the general public. Commitment to accessibility policies will ultimately benefit your business because creating inclusive environments allows for greater participation of people living with disabilities. In turn, this fosters better relationships with employees, residents, and reputation with the general public, while additionally enhancing your business practices to become more robust by incorporating policies that address people's different lived experiences. With 1 in 5 people living with disabilities, many renters and your employees will face unique challenges that requires housing providers and employers to respond promptly to addressing and removing barriers. Creating an accessibility plan is vital to accompany your policy that sets out the steps you will take for the realization of your policy and goals.
Private, nonprofit, and public housing providers with 50 or more employees must develop statements of commitment to accessibility and make them publicly available. They must also create written accessibility policies and make them publicly available, ideally on a website or a social media page. In addition, you'll need to post in a public area, for example, a bulletin board. Finally, private, nonprofit, and public housing providers with 50 or more employees must create written multi-year accessibility plans and update them at least once every 5 years and post them on a website if there is one. These statements of commitment, accessibility policies, and plans must be provided in an accessible format if a request is received from someone with a disability. In developing your own accessibility policies, CIRA's suggested approach is to follow 3 steps. Step 1, determine what you need to do. Step 2, assess your level of accessibility against the AODA requirements. And step 3, create your accessibility policies and plan with the first 2 in mind. And we'll talk about each of these steps in detail. To determine what you have to do, spend some time researching the requirements for your organization under the AODA. You should read the AODA itself and the IASR, the Integrated Accessibility Standards Regulation, and pay particular attention to the requirements for your organization based on its size. It may be helpful to get a team together from within your organization and learn about accessibility broadly speaking, including the definition of disability and understanding barriers and solutions. This webinar and the accompanying guide are a good start to understanding your accessibility requirements. A link to the guide is included in this slide for your convenience. Please also call the AODA hotline if you have any questions.
The second step is to assess your level of accessibility. This will help in developing strategies that can determine your business's accessibility priorities. It's important to review accomplishments. First step is to determine what your business has already done and what achievements it has made towards accessibility and to meet Ontario's laws. The next is to identify barriers to accessibility in your business practices and residential complexes. Meeting AODA laws can help you remove many barriers. Look at your policies, procedures, programs, and services as a good starting point to identify obstacles. The last is to set priorities. Once the barriers have been identified, you can begin to set your priorities to moving towards accessibility. Ontario.ca/accessibility, along with CIRA's AODA guide, can be used to figure out accessibility requirements that have not been achieved and work towards them. Additionally, identifying barriers that are often used by renters in respect to your facilities and services that may not be specifically listed in the AODA but may pose barriers for persons living with disabilities should be deemed as priorities.
After working through steps 1 and 2, it's now time to develop your policies and plan, which are comprised of 3 elements: your statement of commitment, the accessibility policies, and the accessibility plan. The statement of commitment summarizes your organization's commitment to meeting the accessibility needs of persons with disabilities. Accessibility policies, like all policies, are organizational rules that outline how an organization should operate and interact with its employees and customers, in this case renters, in pursuit of its accessibility goals. An accessibility plan outlines the steps an organization will take to prevent and remove barriers to accessibility, as well as the timelines associated with achieving those steps.
The statement of commitment summarizes your organization's commitment to meeting the accessibility needs of people with disabilities. As you write it, consider your organization's vision, overall goals, and its current level of accessibility. Think about the accessibility message you want to convey to your employees and the public. Once you have finished the statement, tell your employees about it by posting it on your intranet or asking an executive on the team to send an email message to all employees. Make the statement of commitment publicly available and provide it in an accessible format on request. Consider posting it on your website if you have one, or incorporating the statement into your accessibility policies or in your accessibility plan. We will now look at an example of a statement of commitment that was written by Toronto Community Housing Corporation. It comes from their multi-year accessibility plan. Toronto Community Housing is committed to providing an inclusive environment to residents and employees with disabilities in accordance with the core principles of accommodation, dignity, independence, integration, and equal opportunity, outlined in the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, 2005, the Ontario Human Rights Code, 1990, and the complementary legislation of the Integrated Accessibility Standards Regulation, Accessibility Standards for Customer Service, the Employment Standards Act, and the Ontario Building Code. Toronto Community Housing recognizes the need to identify and remove barriers faced by people with disabilities and will achieve greater accessibility by aligning with a culture that recognizes the dignity and worth of every individual.
Your accessibility policies should identify how your business is to interact with employees and renters. They can be developed in 4 steps. Step 1, identify gaps in your current policies. Some of your current policies may already address accessibility or Ontario's accessibility laws. For example, you may already have a policy about making information accessible to people with disabilities on request. Alternatively, when assessing your organization's level of accessibility, you may have discovered that some of your existing policies create barriers. For example, a policy requiring renters to raise issues to the landlord in writing may create a barrier for persons with disabilities who are not able to do that. Review what you are required to do under Ontario's accessibility laws, the barriers you discovered in your assessment, and your overall accessibility goals. Next, think about whether creating a policy could help you achieve your goals. You may also adapt your current policies to include accessibility. For example, your policy related to providing or to requiring complaints made to management in writing could be expanded to provide additional options for individuals who are unable to do so. Step 2, organize and write your policies. Once you have decided what content to include, organize it in a clear, logical sequence that's easy to understand. Consider starting with your statement of commitment and then adding your other accessibility policies. Your policies must be consistent with the principles of dignity, independence, integration, and equal opportunity. You can choose how to format your policies, but they must be documented. Step 3, publish your policies. You must make your policies available to the public. For example, you could post information about the policies on your website or in your reception area. If requested, you must also provide a copy of the policies in an accessible format. You may also want to share your policies with your employees. So they can see your commitment to accessibility. Consider sending a memo or posting it on your organization organization's intranet if you have one. And step 4, review and update your policies. A policy is a living document and should be reviewed and updated whenever your organization's practices or procedures change. For example, as you move forward with implementing your multi-year accessibility plan, you may need to update the policies you have written or draft new policies.
Next, we will talk about plan. Review the list of priorities you created in step 2, which includes legal requirements that you have not met, as well as the barriers you identified as a priority for removal. Your next task is to develop strategies to address your priorities. Your organization is not required to remove or eliminate every barrier right away. You can be strategic about which ones to tackle immediately. You must meet your legal requirements by the deadline outlined in the report you received from the ontario.ca/accessibility.